It's a really difficult subject for some families. There's been studies that have been done where families would rather talk about funeral plans than bring up the conversation about driving concerns.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then the other part of that too is that the drivers themselves, when they go to see their doctors, less than 20% talk to their physician about what might be going on with their own driving. And so the doctors aren't having these conversations either.
Yeah.
So what I always say to families is try and come from a place of love, care, and concern. You really need to kind of put yourself in their shoes because this is a life-changing event when they're no longer safe. And the driver that has cognitive impairment, they truly do believe that they're still a good, safe driver.
Well, welcome back to Spotlight. I am excited like usual, but hosting another wonderful guest today, Melanie Henry, who is founder of Driver Cognitive Assessment Center, DCAC. Melanie has created this wonderful business that's there to support seniors, make sure they're safe drivers, they have the tools they need, and really is a resource to our community. So, really excited to dive into her business model to see how she's helping seniors and our community and how it's making an impact with our safe drivers out there. So, Melanie, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you. I haven't heard about a business model quite like yours until I met you. What is your secret sauce? How did you get into this and what was your inspiration?
Back in the day, I still am a driving instructor, and I had taken on a role at a local nonprofit here in the East Bay, and I was coordinating rides, medical rides for seniors in our community. And many of them were still driving, but they could barely get themselves in and out of the vehicles. They really needed a lot of support, and I was becoming rather concerned about how many of them were still driving. And our office was at a senior center, and many people would be, driving over the curbs, leaving their vehicle at the turn circle to go off and play bingo. And I thought, my goodness, who's evaluating these drivers? So, yeah, I did some research and came across this technology and thought, we've got to bring this to the Bay Area.
I
It's a
love that.
subject really passionate to me.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I've seen you present a couple of times and just the slides that you're able to show when you're presenting in front of an audience. It's quite amazing for one, the technology that we have available to us today for safety driving. And then two, the kinds of accidents that actually happen that you would never think of, right? Which is just, it's mind-boggling how sometimes there are drivers out there that probably shouldn't be behind the wheel. And I'm wondering, just like you said, how did they get there? How are they still driving? How do they still have their license? Or maybe who's the one that should be responsible for making sure that these people, more specifically for this conversation, our seniors, are driving in a safe way? Or if they shouldn't be driving, they're aware of that,
Yeah.
right? So, can you tell me what does it look like if you have someone that needs to have an assessment done? What does that look like? How do you go about that process?
The whole goal of my assessment center is not to discriminate. There's a lot of families, a lot of doctors still, a lot of people in the community that believe that if you are 80 years of age or 85, that you need to stop driving. And we know that that should not be a determining factor. I mean, certainly the risk can go up once you hit kind of 85 plus. But I have drivers who come in here who are well into their 90s and they're still a good, safe driver. So the overarching goal for me and for most people that work in this area is we want to protect the good, healthy, safe drivers, but we want to identify those drivers that are at risk. So, how an assessment looks at my location is they don't need a doctor's referral. They self refer, the family can call. I do get referrals from physicians. That's a whole different process. The client, known as the driver, they're in control of who gets a copy of the report and a lot of forms to fill out around that. And then they come on in. It's an in-office assessment using an iPad. It's science and technology that's been around for 30 years. Over 210,000 of these have been completed in North America.
Wow.
It's evidence-based, it's age-normed, it's objective, and the results are fair and accurate. And families really appreciate having a third party. They're not the bad guys. They're not the ones making the decision, going on, their gut feeling about my parents driving. So yeah, it's a really easier process because they come in, do an in-office assessment, and then they have a break. And then we go out on the road in an evaluator vehicle that has a brake and a gas pedal. I'm with them, and we go on a predetermined, specialized route. And I'm looking for what kind of driving mistakes are they making, driving errors that would show that there's cognitive impairment. There's over 70 areas that we're looking at. So the
Wow.
results are combined, yeah, to give a driver risk score. Then the client has an opportunity to meet with me. We go over the results. We usually do that by Zoom, or they come back into the office. And then if I have an unsafe driver, we then have a conversation about what transportation needs do they have. And I work really closely with the family to driver to figure out, can they still get to all of their usual places? Because we know those next 6 months, if somebody has to retire from driving, those next 6 months are really critical in terms of trying to alleviate any depression and social
Yeah.
isolation as a result. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how it happens. And I don't report to the DMV. Really is information for the family, for the driver, giving a baseline of where they're currently at. Unless the doctor's involved, then of course they get a copy and they're working closely.
I love that. And it sounds like you're a very safe place for your clients and their family members to come to, because your intention is not to kind of go and report and tattle on them per se. It's really to make sure that they have the tools and resources they need to ensure that they're safe drivers. This brings a memory to mind. I have a great aunt who's currently, she'll be 95, I believe, in 2 months. And she just gave up her driver's license, maybe around the time she hit 90. But I can recall before that, she was probably in her late 80s, and she was driving my younger sister to the post office. She thought she had hit the brake and she accidentally hit the gas and she ran into a tree. It shook her up tremendously. There was a little bit of damage done to the car, a little bit of damage done to the tree, but I think mentally that just really it scared her. But it didn't mean that she wasn't a good driver or a safe driver. It was truly an accident. Other than that, there had been no issues. She could still see good. Everything was still mentally, cognitively, she was still there. And I bet that there is a stigma on, like you said, on our, seniors, especially those that are above 80 years old, that if there is an accident, you shouldn't drive at all. But that's not really the case, right? And so I would think that at this time, this could be a good time for family members or even, the senior themselves to come in and get an assessment and determine, where am I right now in this process? Am I a safe driver still? Is there things that I can alter or change to make sure that I'm a safer driver? Or should I not be driving because it's just not the best thing for me or anybody else? And that could have been even a good tool for me to have as a family member for my aunt. Had I known that DCAC was something that existed, what would you say to that experience? Do you have clients or family members who run into something very similar? If you had a client that had just got in an accident, how would you kind of handle that situation?
And that's a good question because there's such a variety of situations for people that find themselves in this position. And what happens is if your confidence gets really rattled after having a collision like that, it can really be a big setback. So I work one-on-one with that driver in a 90-minute session to work on building up, back up their defensive driving skills, working on their confidence so they are feeling more sure behind the wheel, going over all of the road rules and really tailoring it for what they need. I get a lot of clients where maybe they have a DMV on-road test coming up and they need to review all the road rules because they really haven't been bothered about the cycle lanes and just brushing up. I try to use a lot of technology in my business. There's some really good driving apps that help those older drivers to stay really sharp about situational awareness and being
Mm.
aware of all of the distractions that are happening on the road. So if I have somebody like that, we figure out, well, is it a cognitive issue or is it more about something that happened with a collision that wasn't where they weren't at fault, or maybe they were. Sometimes we do need to get that cognitive assessment done. Sometimes we don't. It really is a conversation that just needs to be had, and I try to gather as much information as I possibly can to figure out, well, what's our first step.
Yeah, and it really is a sensitive subject, like you pointed out. I think taking away someone's license or their driving ability, sometimes to them, it really impacts their mental health. It feels like you're taking their dignity away and their independence away. And so allowing them to be part of that process, and that's what I'm hearing from you, is that they really get to be part of that process and deciding, or at least learning that this is or isn't the thing for me. So I know you've talked before about some of the kind of tools that are available to help seniors. Can you kind of describe some of the things that are available for seniors that help them to remain a safe driver, but also prolong their ability to drive safely?
Okay, so first and foremost, I say to every driver, stay on top of your vision exams
Mm.
with someone that's got a medical qualification, because 90% of what you're processing behind the wheel is through your vision. So that's number one. If you need cataract surgery, don't be scared, get it done. Most people over 65 will have some degree of it. There are all sorts of driving adaptive devices, from like little grab bars, little handy bars that you can put in the door lock, through to swivel cushions if you have knee and hip issues. There's also seatbelt pullers, there's seatbelt extenders, and tons of resources on Amazon. And if people reach out to you or to me, I'm happy to share that. That's all kind of complimentary, trying to share those resources.
I love
I
that.
also encourage people to stay on top of like your driving skills. Do the AARP Smart Driver classes that they have. The in-person are really good. They're about 4 hours, done over 2 weeks, and they really review all of the road rules and the knowledge. And you're in a group situation, and then you'll get a discount on your insurance as well. And then there are a variety of driving apps. One of them is called Drive Focus. $13.99. You do it on a little iPad or a Fire Amazon little tablet,
Yeah,
or you can do it on a touchscreen laptop. And that one is really good at building up your reaction times and your situational awareness to what's going out on the road. And it's taken from as if you're behind the wheel. That's some of the ones that come to mind. What else do we have out there? The big one that we're trying to get this whole initiative back up and running here in Northern California is the Power Fit program, which is run by AAA, AARP, and the American Occupational Therapy Association. That's a really fun community event where seniors, older drivers, they stay in their car and they go through a 12-point checkup system where we're making sure they can see over the steering wheel, that they know that they can adjust the seatbelt, that they're not riding on their tippy toes, help reduce the blind spots by adjusting their mirrors. And they learn how to do all of this for themselves. It's a wonderful initiative, but we need to, start getting more people trained and having more of those.
I
But
really
yeah,
love
there's
that.
lots of great things going on here in the Bay Area.
That's wonderful. And you'll have to tell me if this program does start back up in senior living. You know, we have so many residents that still are driving and will continue to drive. So, knowing that there are these resources and these training tools, all these different things available for our seniors, our residents, that's really important. We're always happy to be part of it. Uh,
Love to partner with communities like
good,
yourselves. Yeah.
good. And so I am hearing a ton of benefits for seniors to really go through an assessment. Are there some benefits that maybe we haven't talked about that would be directly for a senior going through an assessment, in addition to what are the benefits to our community?
Well, a really obvious one is obviously safer roads. When
Hmm.
we can identify those people that are at risk, we can, I mean, just that in itself is saving lives.
Yeah.
There's also then, just the peace of mind that families have, and just being able to kind of not wait till there's a crisis, until there's a collision, another tragedy. What a lot of people don't know about is that in this country, every day there's more than 100 storefront collisions where somebody confuses the pedal or they get it wrong. And a lot of those drivers are cognitively impaired, or they
Mm,
might have some other kind of medical issue. And 16,000 injuries a year with 2,600 innocent people that are killed. And
wow.
there's a really affordable way for our communities to respond to this. Businesses and local cities need to kind of partner more together to put bollards out the front. And they're those columns that are filled with concrete and steel that will stop the vehicle from going through into the storefront or into the hospital or whatever the building might be. That's something as a community I really would love to see more going
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember seeing that in your presentation, and just even those numbers were astonishing, how impacted we are as a community from this
Mm,
simple action of just pushing on the gas instead of the, again, just like my aunt, instead of the
yeah.
brake, whether you're impaired or not. It's such a concern. And there is an easy, it's a fairly simple way to protect our pedestrians. And our storefronts,
Yeah.
if we're honest. So everybody, even the driver, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that we kind of briefly talked about was families. And I know that not every senior is going to freely come to you and say, hey, I need an assessment, or I might not be drivable anymore. So I know that usually families, adult children are going to be the gatekeepers, or at least the people that we see more often than the senior themselves. And again, it's a really sensitive subject. How do we have these conversations? How do you support family members so that they can, or you can have these conversations with seniors in a way that is impactful, meaningful, yet it really has empathy in where they're at and their future, which may not include driving anymore?
It's a really difficult subject for some families. There's been studies that have been done where families would rather talk about funeral plans than bring up the conversation about driving concerns.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then the other part of that too is that the drivers themselves, when they go to see their doctors, less than 20% talk to their physician about what might be going on with their own driving. And so the doctors aren't having these conversations either.
Yeah.
So, what I always say to families is try and come from a place of love, care, and concern. You really need to kind of put yourself in their shoes because this is a life-changing event when they're no longer safe. And the driver that has cognitive impairment, they truly do believe that they're still a good, safe driver. And so I think having those conversations, you want to have them early.
Yeah.
There's a driver planning agreement that was put out by AAA. Happy to
Okay.
share that resource, and involving your loved one, involving your parent in that whole conversation is super critical. And talking about the liability and the risk concerns, and talking about, the potential that there could be a fatality out there because nobody gets behind the wheel and sets out to go out on the road and have these kind of tragedies happening. So yeah, I just encourage people to just plan ahead, think about who in the family is the best person to have the conversation. A lot of families will call me after the event and they've unfortunately decided that the person that's the most bombastic, the most authoritative, is the one that should talk to mum or dad, when in fact you should save that person for enforcing any driving changes that are going to be happening and have the person that's the closest to mum or dad, be the one to talk to them about it. And most of the time when you say we're just concerned, we want to make sure you're safe, we want to have more years together, we don't want to be visiting you in a nursing home because you've been in a collision, it seems to be the piece that then helps that person to come on in, because most of my clients, they are really anxious when they come in here. This is a big risk that they're taking. They're trying to trust the process. So
Right.
yeah, I think the more support that they have, and we kind of come from that framework as well. We try very hard to welcome them and answer all the questions before they even begin.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing too is that we need to educate the younger generations, the adult children, on what are the resources available for your mom and dad or your loved one. Also, professionals. We're a big part of this, and we really are a walking resource, if you will, for our
Mm,
seniors, for our
absolutely.
clients, for our family members. And so I know you're a big networker, just as I am, and I know you're really involved in the community. But have you found that there's specific ways that your fellow community members or business owners can help contribute to education, awareness, or even support for safety driving or the education around driving as a senior, or even having access to the resources?
I think that certainly as a community, right? It's a community responsibility.
Yeah,
So I think one of the things too is certainly about that storefront collision issue, like just raising awareness that we all need to do more.
yeah,
For me, it's certainly changed how I even dine outside. I'm just a little more wary now about sitting out on the sidewalk, or sometimes they have the parklet actually out on the street in areas that are kind of zoned off. I think that the car fit program is great. I think if you hear about education that's going on about driving, go and attend, connect with all the partners like yourselves, because I'm trying to kind of educate all of you so that you can then be a valuable resource.
yeah,
There's also the ADED, ADED.net. It's the Association for Driver Rehabilitation Specialists. You can go on there, you can find a driver rehab provider, but in their drop down, there's a resource and they have all these fact sheets.
hmm,
So if you have somebody you know that's got cognitive impairment, or someone that's got neuropathy or diabetes, or even like the younger drivers that, have autism, there are
yeah.
all these really helpful fact sheets. I think the more we can do to get educated and get involved, the car fit program is another way we're going to be needing to train a lot more volunteers with that too.
That's wonderful. So there are really, I'm hearing so many different resources and tools for people to educate themselves. It's just a matter of us going out and taking initiative, right? Being very proactive in
Yeah.
this. There are so many boomers that are retiring, and the boomer population is just growing every day. I think we're up from 10 to 13,000 a day at this
Mm.
point. How do you see this impacting your line of work? And is there anything that you foresee you'll have to change to address the growing senior population?
Yeah, it's they call it a driving tsunami in this line of work. Yeah, because we have this starting this year, we have like 25% of all American drivers are over the age of 65. We
Wow.
have drivers 70 years plus that are keeping their licenses for longer, but people are outliving their abilities to drive safely for the most part. We have 6.9 million people living with dementia, with an estimated 30 to 40% driving. And many of those people are not having a conversation with their family or their physician. So we don't really know where people are at. It is a real challenge. And in terms of my service, I think there needs to be more cognitive assessments. I'm the only one here in the Bay Area. This technology is attached to other hospitals around the US, but they're not offering both portions of the evaluation. So there isn't the on-road, there's just the in-office, which is like a predictive score. So for me, how I see it changing, we have all these people that are going to be retiring from driving and are driving. We need more ride share services, or we need more driving transportation services going into the
Yeah.
future. People need options, and thankfully we're in the Bay Area, but if you're out in the rural area, that's really hard sometimes. If you don't have a senior center that's active, a lot of those senior centers will have volunteer driver programs, which are fabulous for people to get around. For me, I want to obviously at some point be expanding. I want to have a driving simulator. I want to try and make this as accessible as many people as I possibly can.
I love
So
that.
yeah, yeah, lots of changes. It's a bit of a wake up call for many.
Yeah, absolutely. And those numbers, again, every time I hear numbers like that, just astonishing. And we need to start making a change now. We really
Yeah,
do. If
yeah.
we're going to be prepared for the near future, we need to start making changes, getting volunteers, like you said, bringing that awareness and just being really proactive. Um,
Having a plan, and for families to
yeah.
have a plan, start having that conversation, start getting things in place so it's not a crisis and there's not a tragedy.
Absolutely. Well, Melanie, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you for an assessment for their loved one and for their self, or even for a client, because we do have a lot of professionals that are
Mm.
listening to this, how do they get a hold of you? Do you have an email, a phone number? What's the best way?
Oh, sure. I have a website, dcacbayarea.com. My email is Melanie at dcacbayarea.com, Melanie. The phone number for our office is 925-249-5947. You can find me on LinkedIn, on social media. Always happy to connect. It's a confidential, free, complimentary conversation. And I get people that call that need resources all the time, and I'm happy to share what I know.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a presentation for your community or, local community event that you're going to be at or some kind of education, I'm happy to help.
I love it. And I have seen those presentations for our own senior living community and for professionals, and they're amazing. I mean, what you did for our
Thank you.
resident was just amazing. It was such a good walkthrough. So I do encourage anybody who is in charge of a senior organization or group, get a hold of Melanie. She is so just such great
Thank
insight
you.
and such a great way to present this. And again, even for professionals, so it's a great service. And she's easy to listen to. So that's all. I can listen to her all day long. Love the accent. But thank you so much for being our guest today. It was amazing to hear from you and just getting the insight of how are you making a change in this world and in our community, and how you're helping seniors, helping
Mm.
our community to stay safe, and really just being a resource and advocate for families and seniors. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Really enjoyed my time with you today.